Monday, 29th of January, 2018. A private jet glides onto a quiet Hampshire airfield, nothing appearing out of the ordinary. A small crew steps out, a few passengers follow, and a row of suitcases is gently lifted onto the tarmac. But as officers begin their routine inspection, something about that luggage makes them slow down. Wednesday, 20th of September, 2023. 5 years later, and more than 200 miles away, another team heads down a rural farm track in North Wales. A trailer stands open in the yard. No traffic, no noise. Only the sense that whatever was happening here has been going on for far too long and is finally reaching its end. 2 teams, 2 locations, nothing obviously linking them at first, yet each one hides something that would eventually draw investigators straight to their doors. This is the story of how a luxury flight into Farnborough and a secluded farm near Mold became the focus of 2 of the most significant drug operations uncovered in modern UK law enforcement, and how both operations ultimately collapsed. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's dive straight into the case. Ordinary jobs, extraordinary cover. In UK crime stories, before their names appeared in headlines or court files, the 4 men at the center of this network seemed, by all outward appearances, like ordinary people living ordinary lives. Martin Neal, from Poole in Dorset, earned his income as a bricklayer. With ongoing building work around sandbanks, he was simply known as a tradesman who took on construction projects. Alejandro Embo, the youngest at 28, worked shifts at the Mary Shelley Wetherspoons in Bournemouth and delivered pizzas on the side for a local business. Victor Franco Lorenzo, originally from Spain but settled in Bournemouth, moved between various hospitality jobs. And Jose Ramon Migueles Baz, the oldest at 56, was a hairdresser from Valladolid who regularly traveled between Spain and the UK for work. Nothing in their jobs, routines, or lifestyles hinted at international crime. The group adopted an identity built around wealth, modern tech ventures, and the music industry, an image carefully crafted to make their movements seem legitimate. We'll explore each of them in more detail shortly. At the center of their plan was a woman using the name Claire Harris. She contacted private jet company Diamante Jets, claiming to represent wealthy clients involved in cryptocurrency projects and music industry ventures. She arranged private flights, demanded particular ground handling companies, and paid entirely in cash. We'll break down each part of this operation separately. Choosing private aviation was no accident. Instead of facing heavy scrutiny at major hubs like Heathrow or Gatwick, airports packed with passengers and fully manned customs units, the group repeatedly selected Farnborough, a smaller airfield used for business and executive travel. Farnborough did have border force officers, but not in the numbers seen at major airports. And across the UK, this vulnerability is well recognized. More than 3,000 small airstrips exist, many with minimal on-site checks. Criminal networks often see these smaller airfields as easier gateways, especially for high-value shipments or low-profile movements. But their normal lives and borrowed identities were only the surface. Within weeks, the first test run would expose just how carefully planned this operation was and how determined the network was to avoid detection. The December dry run before the NCA drug bust. What unfolded in early December 2017 would later be recognized as the rehearsal run, the first complete demonstration of how the network planned to move drugs, cash, and personnel between the UK and Colombia without raising alarms. On the 8th of December 2017, 3 members of the group, Alejandro Embo, Victor Franco Lorenzo, and Martin Neal, lifted off from Luton Airport aboard a private jet paid for entirely in cash. The booking, again arranged by the woman calling herself Claire Harris, came to roughly £128,500, all settled up front. She insisted that a specific Colombian ground handling firm, Central Charter, take charge of the aircraft when it landed in Bogotá. That insistence would later strike investigators as a strong indication of prior coordination between the UK-based organizers and their Colombian counterparts. Notably absent from this trip was Jose Ramon Miguel Baz. His absence on the dry run would gain significance later, hinting that roles shifted between flights and suggesting that the December journey served more as a test than as a full-scale smuggling mission. Even the flight path raised eyebrows. The return leg included a stop in the Azores, an uncommon detour when compared with standard private jet routes between Colombia and the UK. But the true significance lay not in the route or the cost. It was what happened when the men arrived back in Britain on the 11th of December. At Farnborough Airport, a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting. This detail reinforced the persona they had carefully built: wealthy cryptocurrency entrepreneurs and music industry figures, supposedly heading to meet singer Bruno Mars. From there, they traveled to an address in Bromley, bringing several suitcases along with them. None of the bags were checked by Border Force. No questions, no searches, no interruption. The group completed the journey without resistance. Months later, when the timeline was reconstructed, investigators uncovered X-ray scans from Colombia showing suitcases filled with large stacks of banknotes linked to that December flight. These scans were never flagged at the time. They surfaced only after the January arrests and became key evidence that cash had likely been flown out of the UK. If true, it meant the December trip wasn't just a reconnaissance mission. It was part of a financial exchange tied directly to the broader smuggling operation. That quiet December journey proved the route could work. What came in January would push the same method to its limit, with new personnel, more luggage, and far greater stakes. Staging the January operation, UK true crime. Stories by late January 2018, the group had already shown that a private jet could travel to Bogotá and return without serious intervention. This time, every step of preparation was more polished and more intentional. On the 25th of January 2018, José Ramón Miguel Bodas flew from Spain to the UK, checking into a Premier Inn in Bournemouth, close to where both Martin Neal and Alejandro Yeba were living. That same evening, the full group gathered at the Chelsea Harbour Hotel in London. Just like their use of luxury cars and high-end services, the stay fed into the elaborate persona they were trying to project. The next morning on the 26th, luxury vehicles arrived at the hotel to escort them to Luton's signature terminal. These cars carried the men and an unusually large number of bags, 12 suitcases in total, far more than one would expect for a short international trip. Investigators later remarked that the amount of luggage alone made an impression, showing just how much the operation relied on boldness and presentation. Meanwhile, preparations for the second flight were already locked in. The booking mirrored the December trip almost exactly, around £138,500 in cash, organized by the same woman, with the same explanation and the same ground handling team in Bogotá. This repetition suggested that whoever controlled the Colombian side needed a particular team on the ground for the scheme to run smoothly. Bogotá groundside, drug documentary, real stories. When the private jet touched down at El Dorado International Airport in Bogotá, the operation shifted into the hands of the Colombian branch of the conspiracy. El Dorado is among South America's busiest airports, yet the group's luggage passed through an unusually choreographed sequence of handlers. Colombian authorities later uncovered that criminals in Bogotá had deployed a coordinated set of tactics to move the cargo without standard scrutiny. Among their tools was a supposedly corrupt ground handling employee whose access allowed the network to operate deep inside restricted areas. The suitcases were reportedly transported to the plane in armored vehicles, a method reserved for high-risk or sensitive cargo, not routine passenger baggage. One of the most striking details exposed later was the presence of a fake police officer accompanied by a counterfeit sniffer dog. This imposter carried out a staged inspection of the suitcases before they were loaded onto the jet. The goal was simple: create the illusion of an official check and discourage any legitimate officer from re-examining the bags. Once the performance ended, the luggage, now packed with hundreds of kilos of cocaine, was placed back onto the aircraft as though it had passed proper security. The cocaine had been prepared long before the jet's arrival, each kilogram bricked tightly sealed, uniform, and stamped with cartel identifiers. Some packages carried the Superman emblem, a mark often linked to certain Colombian trafficking groups. Others featured the word Esco, which investigators believed was a nod either to Pablo Escobar or the broader Medellin legacy. For UK authorities, the events in Bogotá became essential in proving the size and deliberate nature of the operation. By the time the jet departed Colombia, the suitcases contained far more than clothes. and the careful groundwork laid in Bogotá was about to collide with the scrutiny waiting for them back in the UK, marking the beginning of the end for the entire conspiracy. The return to Farnborough, British crime stories. As the jet re-entered UK airspace on the 29th of January 2018, the men on board likely believed the plan was unfolding exactly as it had during the December rehearsal. Everything appeared to be following the same script, until it wasn't. This time, Border Force officers had been tipped off within minutes of the flight's arrival. Several red flags triggered their interest: the unusual number of suitcases, inconsistencies in the passengers' explanations, and the context of their earlier trip. A decision was made to escalate the checks, and the group were guided into a search room. What unfolded in that room would later form the backbone of the entire case. As officers opened the suitcases, the top layer revealed a scattering of women's and children's clothing, clearly placed there to imply innocent travel. Beneath that thin disguise lay the actual cargo. Packed tightly in multiple layers were 513 1-kilogram bricks of cocaine. Laboratory analysis placed the purity at around 79%, exceptionally high for a shipment intended for wholesale supply. Altogether, the haul approached half a ton, with an estimated wholesale value of £15.39 million and a potential street value upwards of £41 million. CCTV cameras captured every moment from several angles. These clips later became some of the most widely shared visuals associated with the case, offering a rare on-camera glimpse into what had been a secretive global smuggling chain. The moment the first brick was lifted into view, the illusion of luxury travel vanished. It became one of the largest drug seizures to arrive by air in the UK in recent years, and the pivotal moment from which everything else in the case unfolded. The evidential spine of the UK police drug bust. By the time officers completed their search at Farnborough, the cocaine was only the start. What followed was the assembly of an evidential framework that prosecutors would later describe as clear, deliberate, and increasingly impossible for the defendants to detach themselves from. Much of that framework came from devices seized during the arrests. Phones, travel paperwork, and movement records collectively mapped the group's involvement long before the January flight. Among the seized items were several mobile phones, some used for everyday communication, others dedicated to more discreet interaction. Most notable was an encrypted handset taken from Alejandro Yebo, pointing to a level of operational security typical of organized crime groups, not four men acting alone. Even without full message access, the mere presence of that device strengthened the argument that the group were receiving direction from figures higher up the hierarchy. Call data patterns provided the next crucial layer. Investigators traced communication links between the men across the charge window, spanning 30 October 2017 to 30 January 2018. Piece by piece, these elements created a coherent narrative. Their messages, their movements, their behavior at airports, even the bold manner in which the luggage was presented. All of it supported the conclusion that the January seizure was not accidental, but the result of a meticulously planned operation. The collapse of the cover stories, UK crime series. When the trial began at Woolwich Crown Court in early 2019, prosecutors laid out the full chain of flights, bookings, and logistics behind the smuggling operation. What followed during this stage was a systematic dismantling of the defendants' explanations. One of the earliest accounts put forward was the claim that the trips had a charitable purpose. Several defendants said they believed their travel related to One Young World, a well-known international charity focused on youth engagement. Prosecutors quickly showed that One Young World had no record, no communication, and no knowledge of any of the men. With that defense weakened, attention shifted to a more glamorous narrative: the idea that they were involved in the music industry and had flown to Bogotá to meet Bruno Mars. Investigators accepted that Bruno Mars had performed in Colombia during the relevant December window. But beyond that coincidence, there was nothing. No evidence of an invitation, backstage access, studio involvement, or contact with organizers. The name had been dropped simply because it sounded plausible. Running alongside these explanations was a more personal defense centered on Stephen Neal, who had joined the January flight. His legal team argued he had no role in the planning, no understanding of the suitcase contents, and no reason to be suspicious of those who invited him. In the end, the jury accepted that the prosecution could not prove he knew about the cocaine. He was acquitted. For the remaining four, however, the arguments fell apart. All four were convicted of the fraudulent evasion of a prohibition relating to a Class A drug, covering their involvement in both the December rehearsal and the January importation. Neil Embo and Franco Lorenzo each received 24-year sentences. Because Mijes Bodas had only taken part in the January flight and not the earlier test run, he was handed a slightly reduced 20-year term. But the courtroom verdicts did not close the story. In Colombia, the point where the suitcases were loaded, a parallel investigation launched. 5 individuals were arrested, with early findings indicating corrupt access within El Dorado Airport. For the National Crime Agency and Border Force, the case exposed a serious vulnerability in the UK's smaller airports. Sites designed for executive travel, not high-volume customs scrutiny. These locations had become attractive access points for organized crime. And just as this case wrapped up, investigators were already confronting another operation, one whose size and boldness would challenge everything they believed they knew about criminal logistics. Architecture of a Pipeline. Real crime documentary. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than another wave of cocaine flooding Britain's major cities. But behind the scenes, investigators were about to uncover something very different. An industrial-scale supply machine built thousands of miles away. Between May and September 2023, a transnational criminal network, directed partly from overseas, including senior figures based in Dubai, quietly assembled a supply chain stretching from South America through mainland Europe and deep into the UK's criminal markets. This was not a single shipment or a risky one-off. It was a continuous conveyor system designed to feed Britain's cocaine market with volume, consistency, and precision. According to later assessments from the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit, the network wasn't chasing modest gains or regional influence. Its goal was sustained national supply, the kind of capability only top-tier criminal infrastructures can achieve. Their working estimate was blunt. 2 to 3 tons of cocaine were expected to move through this pipeline, enough to shift the wholesale price across the UK. Every long-running drug pipeline relies on someone who can cross borders without drawing suspicion. Someone whose movements are so unremarkable they become invisible. In this network, that role fell to 48-year-old Guy Remington. He traveled alone, using a specially modified vehicle due to paralysis, towing a small trailer behind him. To anyone watching him through Eurotunnel terminals, he appeared exactly as he claimed to be, a disabled man running a modest cross-channel business. But behind that quiet exterior was the courier the entire operation relied on. Between 3rd May and 21st September 2023, Remington made 9 Eurotunnel crossings. Each journey followed the same script. He left the UK, traveled briefly through Europe, carried out a discreet handover, and returned home with the same calm predictability. There were no searches, no delays, and his reliability became the disguise. Supporting his cover was a simple business front that made his frequent travel and trailer use appear routine. Yet the true strength of the pipeline was hidden inside the trailer itself. What looked like ordinary wooden paneling concealed expertly crafted hiding places that made the entire system function. The construction was intentionally simple: timber, screws, and joinery that blended seamlessly into the trailer's frame. Only someone who knew exactly where to press or unscrew would discover the hides. There were no electronics, no welded compartments, no obvious modifications. Even a trained officer would need specific intelligence to justify dismantling it. And that moment was coming. Tirlas, Goch, where UK criminal gangs worked. While the couriers moved product across borders, the real engine of the UK operation was being built in North Wales, in a place few people would ever think to look. Tirlas Goch, a remote farm tucked along a narrow single-track road outside Holywell. To the casual eye, it was just another quiet countryside property, an aging farmhouse, weathered outbuildings, and open fields stretching toward the tree line. But for 37-year-old tenant Luke Hurst, who took over the site, Tirlas Goch was more than farmland. It was the perfect location for an industrial-scale cocaine distribution hub. Hurst was the man waiting on the UK side, the organizer who transformed a peaceful rural farm into a strategic node capable of supplying multiple cities. Investigators would later describe him as the on-the-ground coordinator, ensuring that whenever shipments arrived from Europe, there was a safe landing spot and a reliable method to push the product outward. From the farm, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, and beyond were only a short drive away. Remote enough to hide, central enough to distribute. But the genius of the setup was in the handover method. Simple, low visibility, and designed to keep Tirlas Goch completely off the radar. Customers never visited the farm itself. Instead, meetings happened at neutral locations, service stations along the AI-55 or the quiet lengths of Pinfold Lane. Hearst or a trusted associate would pick up a customer's vehicle, take it to the farm for loading, and return it to the same neutral point afterward. For months, the system worked flawlessly until the day everything unraveled. Downstream networks and tools, UK crime cases. If Tirlas Goch was the engine room, the downstream operators were the arteries feeding the network. One key figure in this secondary tier was Thomas Smith, a Liverpool-based distributor in his early 40s. His role was quiet, calculated, and essential. Investigators learned he made regular trips into North Wales, arriving at predetermined handover points where vehicles were swapped for runs to the farm. And his involvement didn't stop at cocaine. What police later revealed was far darker, which we will return to shortly. Further south, another critical piece of the system played a very different part. Morgan Towner, a 47-year-old courier from Surrey, operated hundreds of miles from the Welsh hub, but was tightly integrated into the same chain. His job was to run southbound loads, moving shipments from the farm into the home counties and beyond. The van he used looked ordinary, the kind parked outside any tradesman's house. But hidden inside was a professionally constructed compartment, so well disguised that trained officers missed it during their initial inspection. The connections between these men became unmistakable once investigators accessed data from seized devices. Phones held message threads about drops, pickups, and countdown timings that matched precisely with ANPR footage and Eurotunnel logs. Location data aligned perfectly with known meeting points. Calls bounced from mast to mast along the A55 and M6, mirroring the journeys tracked by surveillance teams and roadside cameras. Some messages used coded language, others were barely concealed. But together they pointed in one direction, a coordinated operation where every member understood his role and timing was critical. The device data didn't just fill gaps, it stitched the entire pipeline together, proving that Smith's journeys were far from random. For months, these downstream operators kept the conveyor belt alive, until one mistake began dragging the whole structure into the open. What unraveled next would reveal just how far these drugs had traveled. Watching the 9th run and the takedown of a real criminal network. For months, investigators from the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit had been monitoring the movements of the man they believed was the key courier powering the entire pipeline. His routine was unmistakable. Every journey the same pattern, always towing the same modified trailer with its hidden wooden panel compartments. 8 trips had already been logged, but it was the 9th journey that changed everything. On the 18th of September 2023, officers watched once again as Remington left the UK alone, towing the familiar trailer behind his specially adapted vehicle. This time, investigators didn't simply observe the departure, they recognized it as the final confirmation, the decisive piece of the pattern they had been tracking for months. Stopping him at the border would almost certainly secure a major drug seizure, but it would also risk losing the wider network. Allowing him to return, however, meant the trailer would almost certainly lead them straight to the distribution site. If surveillance held, they could bring down every key figure in a single coordinated strike. The strategy formed quickly. Follow Remington the moment he re-entered the UK, track him to the farm, and move in as soon as unloading began. And on the 20th of September 2023, everything unfolded exactly as investigators had predicted. Surveillance teams were already in position around the farm. Then the moment came. The trailer was opened and unloading began. Within seconds, officers surged in. What followed was a brief burst of chaos that marked the collapse of the entire enterprise. Inside the trailer and around the buildings, investigators found exactly what they believed the operation had been constructed to move: a massive consignment of Class A drugs. By the end of the search, the totals were staggering: around 505 kilograms of cocaine and 108 kilograms of heroin, a combined street value approaching £64 million. It was one of the largest mixed drug seizures the region had ever handled. Both Guy Remington and Luke Hurst were arrested immediately, but the takedown didn't end there. Inside Remington's vehicle, officers discovered 183,865 pounds in cash, bundled and ready for transport. Simultaneous raids on his home and associated premises uncovered more than 700,000 pounds in cash, numerous vehicles, and luxury assets. Clear evidence that he was far more than a low-paid courier. He was a trusted linchpin, capable of moving huge volumes and compensated accordingly. Yet even those figures only hinted at the true scale. Based on device data, journey timings, loading patterns, and the quantities found on the 9th run, investigators concluded that the network had likely already imported 2 to 3 tons of Class A drugs before the takedown. At street level, that equated to over 250 million pounds. The operation, which had run with near mechanical precision for months, collapsed in a single morning. But the unraveling of the network was only just beginning. Arrests, charges, and the true scale, UK crime documentary style. With the first arrest secured, police turned toward the next critical figure in the chain. On the 18th of October 2023, officers moved in on Thomas Smith in Liverpool. A search of his property uncovered exactly what investigators expected: cash, around half a kilogram of cocaine, and 987 MDMA tablets, packaged for sale. Device data and notes linked him directly to the pipeline's logistics. He wasn't simply a customer, he was a functioning distributor embedded within the system. The final arrest came on 26 October, when officers detained Morgan Towner in Leatherhead. His removal effectively shut down the last active distribution route connected to the farm. By this stage, the charges were set. Guy Remington faced conspiracy to import and to supply Class A drugs. Luke Hurst, Thomas Smith, and Morgan Towner were charged with conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. Smith also faced additional charges tied to MDMA and cannabis seized during the raid. On the 2nd of November 2023, at Chester Crown Court, all 4 men entered guilty pleas. Sentencing followed on 21st March 2024, with the judge taking into account not only the 613 kilograms recovered during the operation, but the broader structure and scale of the network. According to CPS and BBC reports, the final sentences were Thomas Smith, 18 years, Guy Remington, 18 years Luke Hurst, 12 years Morgan Towner, 7 years, a combined 55 years of imprisonment. What did you make of the case, the operation, and the sentences? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your perspective. And if you found this breakdown insightful, remember to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode of UK Crime Hub.